Hey everybody, how's it going? Today is August 17th, 2019. Earlier today, I did a video on a rice cooker scare that occurred in New York City yesterday, which made national headlines. And in that video, I discussed the numerology of the story and how it was related to the Boston Marathon bombing from 2013. This inspired me to do a little extra digging and take a second look at the Boston Marathon, knowing what I know now regarding the false flag and solar eclipse code that we've really dived into over the past year or so, and talk about how this event was completely coordinated by the same code. And what people need to understand about this is that this code reveals that these events are not the actions of random entities out in the world, but are the consistent actions of some sort of society that's truly running our mainstream media with a goal of fear and ultimately to get the people to surrender their rights due to that built-up fear over so many years of constant terrorism. Now on this channel, we talk about the language of Gematria, the practice of coding numbers into words. And if you haven't heard of the word Gematria or Gematria, indeed, this is part of the design. Once you understand this code and link it up with dates on the calendar and date numerologies, you see that something very fishy is going on in this world. So I have my posts on this Boston Marathon bombing linked below. Also, the video that I did earlier today talking about the rice cooker scare in New York City. So we begin with the fact that in the two primary large number ciphers that I teach, the first one, called English Extended, is based on the ancient Hebrew Gematria and Greek isopsephy charts and uses the current 26-letter alphabet. The Jewish or Latin cipher on the right side uses the Latin alphabet and is structured the same way, but uses the Latin alphabetic order with more modern English characters placed at the end. And this event, Boston Marathon bombing, in the language of Gematria, sums to 1,092 in the English Extended cipher. The 0 in numerology is ignored. So this brings us to the word eclipse in Jewish Gematria, which sums to 192. And it does appear that false flags, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. And when we call them false flags, we don't necessarily mean events that are blamed on another country, but someone whose allegiance lies outside that of the real perpetrators of the crime. And the words false flag have the same gematria as the word eclipse, both in English and in Hebrew. The number 156 is significant to eclipses because an eclipse always occurs 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases after the most recent eclipse. A couple other alignments we'll get to, but in that Jewish Gematria cipher, which is very significant, and I'll link my post to the number 1331 below. In this cipher, the phrase total solar eclipse equals 704, and if you measure from the Boston Marathon bombing on April 15th of 2013 to the next total solar eclipse, it was exactly 704 days later. And in Jewish Gematria, that's the numeric value of total solar eclipse. In Greek, total eclipse of the sun has an ordinal value of 260. The date of the Boston Marathon bombing, April 15th, leaves 216 days on the calendar. And in the reverse alphabetic order, Boston, Massachusetts sums to 260. Now, in Hebrew Gematria, the term for total eclipse, which translates more directly to full eclipse, has a value of 227. Strangely enough, this is the ordinal value in English of eclipse crucifixion code. which seems to be a very significant number to this entire thing, 227. Of course, this number having everything to do with the mathematics of the circle. Of course, the September 11th attacks on the date 11/9 occurring right on the 74th meridian. The word Jesus equals 74. We'll look at that more in a little bit as well. In fact, Jesus' crucifixion also summing to 227 in reverse. There's a significant cipher that uses capital letters, and it's called Francis Bacon Gematria. This cipher adds 26 for every capital letter used. And notice how Boston Marathon, in this calculation method, does have a value of 227. Now, if you measure from the Boston Marathon bombing to the Great American Eclipse, which was the first total solar eclipse to go from coast to coast, from one end of the United States to the other in 99 years, you'll find it was exactly 227 weeks before that total solar eclipse. The bombing was carried out by the Tsarnaev brothers, and in the reverse alphabetic order, Tsarnaev brothers sums to 227. This is a number belonging to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, 227, in the reverse alphabetic order. And if you look up Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the one of these brothers who's certainly the more popular of the two, he had his face on the cover of Rolling Stone later that year and is currently said to be on death row. Look at his birthday, July 22nd. That would be the date written, 22/7. Remember, 22 divided by 7 gives you the first three digits of pi, 3.14. And in the alphabetic order, 22 divided by 7 sums to 314. So this number, 227722, extremely significant to this eclipse code. Now, if you multiply 22 times 7, notice how you get a product of 154. The Boston Marathon bombing was on the date 15/4 as it's written internationally. And remember, in single reduction gematria, Scottish Rite of Freemasonry has this value of 154 as well. The date April 15th is the 105th day on the Gregorian calendar. The word masonry sums to 105. But where this riddle really seems to take off is when you glance at Sumerian gematria. This is the alphabetic order times 6. And from my understanding, the Sumerians are credited with discovering the mathematics around time. And it's interesting that 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. So here we have the alphabetic order times 6. In this method, Boston Marathon equals 1,050. And why is that particular number interesting? Well, if you measure from that date of the Boston Marathon bombing to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which is perhaps one of the most significant terrorist attacks, especially through bombings in the United States history. Of course, we had the Alfred P. Murrah building bombing, which is another ritual in itself, and I'm sure is related. But we're focusing on the World Trade Center because of the mayor of Boston, which we will get to in a little bit. Now, if you measure from this World Trade Center bombing to the Boston Marathon bombing, it's 1,050 weeks, just like how Boston Marathon, summing to 1,050. And in the Jewish Gematria cipher that we showed earlier, the word 2 sums to 1,050. And this sticks out because it was exactly 2 bombs that exploded at the Boston Marathon on that date. Notice how with the prime number cipher, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's full name sums to 1,050, just like Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in that same calculation method, which is based on the alphabetic order but uses prime numbers. So in my videos where I talk about false flag government terror attacks, we're always discussing how the mayor and governor of the states in which, or cities and states in which these occur, are significant. So in this video, we're going to focus on the man who was mayor of Boston at the time of the bombing. His name was Tom Menino. Tom Menino was sworn into office back in the year 1993. And this is why, or at least part of the reason why, this is so significant in relation to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. If you measure from the date July 12th, 1993 to the date of the Boston Marathon bombing, so this is from when he took office to the bombing that took place in his city, you find it happened just barely 237 months after he was sworn in. In the alphabetic order, Boston Marathon bombing sums to 237. In the reverse order, it sums to 330. And today's news story, or yesterday's news story, with the rice cooker scare in New York City is 330 weeks later. So we mentioned how the World Trade Center bombing happened in 1993. Tom Menino, the mayor of Boston, was sworn in the year 1993. Well, check this out. If you measure, again, from the date Tom Menino first took office in the year 1993 to the date of the Boston Marathon bombing, it was exactly 19 years, 9 months, and 3 days. As far as the 93 here, check out Boston Marathon bombing in reduction. 93. A significant number, the sun being 93 million miles away. Propaganda equals 93. God's son summing to 93. He died on the crucifix, which equals 93. So if you measure from the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, which was on February 26th, to the birthday of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who was born on July 22nd that same year, you get exactly 146 days. Using the alphabetic order, Thomas Menino, the name of the mayor of Boston, sums to 146. And these connections only increase. Using the reverse alphabetic order, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev equals 241. In this same method of calculation, Mayor Thomas Menino equals 241. If you measure from the World Trade Center bombing in 1993 to the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013, you find they were separated by 241 months. Now, 241 is a prime number. See how it's the 53rd prime number? Thomas Menino was the 53rd mayor of Boston. The phrase solar eclipse sums to 53. And if you measure from the Boston bombing to the most recent total solar eclipse, it was a span of 5 months and 3 days. Notice how Thomas Menino left office on January 6th of 2014. This means that from the date he took office back in 1993, did I do the wrong measurement here? I may have. We'll come back to this one. I don't have it in my post, so we'll come back to that. However, if you measure from the date he took office to the Boston Marathon bombing, notice how we get exactly 1,031 weeks. Tamerlan Tsarnaev's full name sums to 1031 using prime numbers. Notice how both he and Jahar both have the same middle name, Anzarovich. This is actually the patronymic name or their father's name. And using the alphabetic order, Anzarovich equals 131. Now, 131 is also a prime number. That would be the 32nd prime number. The word bomb equals 32 and 14. The Boston Marathon bombing was on a date with 32 and 14 numerology. I know what it was. If you measure from the date Jahar Tsarnaev was born to the date that Thomas Menino left office, January 6th, 2014, look how old Jahar Tsarnaev was. 7,474 days old. The name Jahar Tsarnaev equals 74 in reduction gematria. This is, by the way, the part of the crucifixion code with Jesus 74 on the cross, 74. Lots of 74s. Remember, that's also a total solar eclipse number. So if we, again, measure from the Boston bombing to Mayor Thomas Menino's last day in office, we get exactly 38 weeks. The name Jahar Tsarnaev equals 380 with capital letters. His full name sums to 380 in the reverse alphabetic order. Think about how his nickname is Jahar. That sums to 38 in the alphabetic order. And on the date of the bombing, Jahar was 38 weeks after his birthday, or a span of 3 months, 8 days before his next birthday. This 38, a number of death. The word killing, also summing to 38. Murder sums to 38 and 83. 83 is the value of Mayor Thomas Menino. And if you measure from the Boston bombing to the date of his death, which occurred on the date October 30th of 2014, you get exactly 80 weeks and 3 days. On this date that Thomas Menino died, Jahar Tsarnaev was exactly 7,770 days old, which is a perfect number to cap off this numeric ritual, 777. Remember, it's the Masonic motto, order out of chaos, that is driving these bullshit government false flag operations. Using the alphabetic order, Boston Mayor Thomas Menino. Well, first of all, notice how it sums to 105 in reduction. Remember, the Boston bombing was on the 105th day of the year and was a numeric ritual in relation to the mayor. But using the alphabetic order, Boston Mayor Thomas Menino equals 303. His death on October 30th fell on the 303rd day of the year. Also notice how the numerology was 74. Remember, Jahar Tsarnaev, whose name sums to 74, was 7,474 days old. Also, crucifixion of Jesus Christ sums to 303, and it's said that Jesus was crucified on the cross under an eclipse at age 33. But check out the reverse alphabetic order. Boston Mayor Thomas Menino equals 318. In the New Testament, the second coming of Christ is mentioned 318 times. And if you measure from the date that he first took office to the date that he died, you'll see, first of all, that it was 3 months and 18 days after the anniversary of the date he took office, just like how Boston Mayor Thomas Menino equals 318. But what's more interesting is that the 318th prime number is 2,111. Measuring from the date he took office to the date he died is also 21 years and 110 days. So there you have the number, 2111, the 318th prime. So somehow they coded both, Boston Mayor Thomas Menino perfectly into this guy's death. Speaking of death, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is currently on death row, and he was sentenced to death on the date June 24th, 2015. Now, he poked a little bit at how his name sums to the same as Freemasonry and Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Well, June 24th is the anniversary of Freemasonry being established through the Premier Grand Lodge of England back in the year 1717. So if you measure from the Boston bombing to the date of his sentencing, it was 26 months and 9 days. And it's interesting because his full name with the alternate spelling, Dzhokhar Anzarovich Tsarnaev, equals 269. This same duration is also exactly 2 years and 70 days. The Boston Marathon bombing sums to 270 in ordinal. Just a little bit more on the numerology of Thomas Menino, the mayor. His name sums to 197 in ordinal. When he was sworn in, it was exactly 197 days after his birthday. Now, if you measure from the first date he stepped in office to his last day in office as mayor, you get 20 years, 5 months, and 3 weeks. This is also 25 weeks and 3 days after the anniversary of the date he took office. So twice we see the number 253. In the alphabetic order, Boston, Massachusetts, the city in which he was mayor, sums to 253. And on his watch, we had the marathon bombing. 253. 253, the 22nd triangular number, both Thomas and Boston, sums to 22. Notice how this is also 178 days after the anniversary of him taking office. In the reverse alphabetic order, Thomas Menino equals 178. And so does Mayor of Boston, 178. So that does it for this post. I just got to add that 74 information in, and you have a pretty solid decode on how the Kabbalistic United States government is terrorizing its citizens through a code based on total solar eclipses, which again have matching gematria with false flag. One last thing I want to share with you. We're going to turn off these ciphers and just focus on the Jewish gematria cipher. Again, this was all related to the eclipse crucifixion code, as I explained in depth, rather sufficiently, I do believe. But there's something else that sticks out. Notice how the name Jesus, who died on the cross under an eclipse allegedly, sums to 985. He was betrayed by Judas, which sums to 895. This was at the age of 33, also 895. And this betrayal led to his ritual human sacrifice, which equals 895. So isn't it interesting that in this same cipher, the Boston Marathon bombing, which is entirely related to the eclipse crucifixion code, sums to 895. So I hope I explained that pretty well. Clear to see that this is nothing to do with two random people with ties to Al-Qaeda or some other organization. We're witnessing federal terrorism by the numbers, and eventually this is going to have to end one way or another. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate the likes, shares, subscriptions. Again, YouTube removes subscribers every time I upload a video, so anything you can do to share the work is appreciated, because the truth about this cabal needs to be exposed, and people need to understand the truth about where they're living. Peace, love, and God bless. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.